Hey, Vexing. Thank you for coming, honey, every single day. I made myself a vanilla frappuccino. I've already had a full cup of coffee, and now I'm having a frappuccino coffee, and then I'm going to hopefully get some stuff done today. Hopefully, I don't know what happened yesterday, but while I was reading, the dogs were on the bed, and I swear they kept thinking they heard their dad because they kept barking at the door. I guess because he was home with them for 4 days, they just naturally think he should be here. I have, like, let me see exactly what it says today. I have 4,024, so I'm 24 over, and I still have not heard anything from YouTube yet. I imagine that's just because of the holidays. Okay, so this is the book one of this series, Left Behind, based on the book of Revelation in the Bible. And we are on chapter 5 today. So I will begin now. Buck Williams ducked into a stall in the Pancom Club men's room to double check his inventory. Tucked in a special pouch inside his jeans, he carried thousands of dollars worth of traveler's checks, redeemable in dollars, euros, or yen. His one leather bag contained two changes of clothes, his laptop, cell phone, digital recorder, accessories, toiletries, and some serious insulated winter gear. He had packed for a 10-day trip to Britain when he left New York 3 days before the apocalyptic disappearances. His practice overseas was to do his own laundry in the sink and let it dry a whole day while wearing one outfit and having one more in reserve. That way, he was never burdened with lots of luggage. Buck had gone out of his way to stop in Chicago first to mend fences with the Global Weekly's bureau chief there, a 50-ish black woman named Lucinda Washington. He had gotten crossways with her. What else was new? When he scooped her staff on, of all things, a sporty story that was right under their noses. An aging Bears legend had finally found enough partners to help him buy a professional football team, and Buck had somehow sniffed it out, tracked him down, gotten the story, and run with it. I admired, I admire you, Cameron, Lucinda Washington had said, characteristically refusing to use his name. I have always, as irritating as you can be, but the very least you should have done was let me know and let you assign someone who should have been on top of this anyway. Sports isn't even your gig, Cameron. After doing the Newsmaker of the Year and covering the defeat of Russia by Israel, or I should say by God Himself, how can you even get interested in penny ante stuff like this? You Ivy League types aren't supposed to like anything but lacrosse and rugby, are you? This was bigger than a sports story, Lucy, and hey, sorry, Lucinda. And wasn't that just a bit of stereotyping lacrosse and rugby? They had shared a laugh. I'm not even saying you should have told me you were in town, she had said. All I'm saying is at least let me know before the pieces run in the weekly. My people and I were embarrassed enough to get beat like that, especially by the legendary Cameron Williams. But for it to be, well, that's why you squealed on me. Lucinda had laughed again. That's why I told Plank it would take a face to face to get you back in my good graces. And what made you think I'd care about that? Because you love me, she had said. You can't help yourself. Buck had smiled. But Cameron, if I catch you in my town again, on my beat, without my knowledge, I'm going to whip your tail. Well, I'll tell you what, Lucinda, let me give you a lead. I don't have time to follow up on. I happen to know the NFL franchise purchase is not going to go through after all. The money was shaky, and the league's going to reject the offer. Your local legend is going to be embarrassed. Lucinda had begun scribbling furiously. You're not serious, she had said, reaching for her phone. No, I'm not, but it was sure fun to see you swing into action. You creep, she had said. Anybody else I'd be throwing out of here on his can. But you love me. You can't help yourself. That wasn't even Christian, she had said. Don't start with that again. Come on, Cameron. You know you got your mind right when you saw what God did for Israel. Granted, but don't start calling me a Christian, just as much as I'll cop to. Stay in town long enough to come to my church, and God'll get you. He's already got me, Lucinda, but Jesus is another thing. The Israelis hate Jesus, but look what God did for them. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Yeah, I know. Anyway, I'm going to London Monday, working on a hot tip from a friend there. Yeah, what? Not on your life. We don't know each other that well yet. She had laughed and they had parted with a friendly embrace. That had been 3 days ago. Buck had boarded the ill fated flight to London, prepared for anything. He was following a tip from a former Princeton classmate, a Welshman who had been working in the London financial district since graduate school. Dirk Burton had been a reliable source in the past, tipping off Buck about secret high level meetings among international financiers. For years, Buck had been slightly amused at Dirk's tendency to buy into conspiracy theories. Let me get this straight, Buck had asked him once. You think these guys are the real world leaders, right? I wouldn't go that far, Cam, Dirk had said. All I know is they're big, they're private, and after they meet, major things happen. So you think they get world leaders elected, hand-picked dictators, that kind of thing? I don't belong to the conspiracy book club, if that's what you mean. Then where do you get this stuff, Dirk? Come on, you're a relatively sophisticated guy. Power brokers behind the scenes, movers and shakers who control the money. All I know is the London Exchange, the Tokyo Exchange, the New York Exchange, we all basically drift until these guys meet. Then things happen. You mean like when the New York Stock Exchange has a blip because of some presidential decision or some vote of Congress? It's really because of your secret group. No, but that's a perfect example. If there's a blip in your market because of your president's health, imagine what it does to world markets when the real money people get together. But how does the market know they're meeting? I thought you were the only one who knew. Cam, be serious. Okay, not a lot of people agree with me, but then I don't say this to just anyone. One of our muckety mucks is part of this group. When they have a meeting, no, nothing happens right away, but a few days later, a week, changes occur. Like what? You're going to call me crazy, but a friend of mine is related to a girl who works for the secretary of our guy in this group. And whoa, hold it. What's the trail here? Okay, maybe the connection is a little remote, but you know the old guy's secretary is not going to say anything. Anyway, the scuttlebutt is that this guy is real hot on getting the whole world onto one currency. You know, half our time is spent on exchange rates and all that. It takes computers forever to constantly readjust every day based on the whims of the markets. Buck was not convinced. One global currency? Never happened, he had said. How can you flatly say that? Too bizarre, too impractical. Look what happened in the States when they tried to bring in the metric system. Should have happened. You Yanks are such rubes. Metrics were only necessary for international trade. Not for how far it is to the outfield wall at Yankee Stadium or how many kilometers it is from Indianapolis to Atlanta. I know, Cam. Your people thought you'd be paving the way for communists to take over if you made the maps and distance markers easy for them to read. And where are your commies now? Buck had passed off most of Dirk Burton's ideas until a few years later when Dirk had called him in the middle of the night. Cameron, he had said, unaware of the nickname bestowed by his friend's colleagues. I can't talk long. You can pursue this or you can just watch it happen and wish it had been your story. But you remember that stuff I was saying about the one world currency? Yeah, I'm still dubious. Fine, but I'm telling you the word here is that our guy pushed the idea at the last meeting of these secret financiers, and you can never say that word. And something's brewing. What's brewing? Well, there's going to be a major United Nations monetary conference, and the topic is going to be streamlining currency. Big deal. It is a big deal, Cameron. Our guy got shot down. He, of course, was pushing for world currency to become pounds sterling. What a surprise that that won't happen. Look at your economy. But listen, the big news, if you can believe any leak out of the secret meeting, is that they have it down to three currencies for the entire world, hoping to go to just one inside a decade. No way, won't happen. Cameron, if my information is correct, the initial stage is a done deal. The United Nations conference is just window dressing. And the decision has already been made by your secret puppeteers? That's right. I don't know, Dirk. You're a buddy, but I think you would rather be doing what I'm doing. Who wouldn't? Well, that's true. I sure wouldn't want to be doing what you're doing. But I'm not wrong, Cameron. Test my information. How? I'll predict what's going to come out of the United Nations within 2 weeks. And if I'm right, you start treating me with a little difference, a little respect. Buck realized that he and Dirk had been sparring the way everyone at Princeton had during weekend pizza and beer bashes in the dorms. Dirk, listen, that sounds interesting, and I'm listening. But you do know, don't you, all kidding aside, that I wouldn't think any less of you even if you were way off base here. Well, thanks, Cam. Really, that means a lot to me. And for the little tidbit, I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm not only going to tell you that the United Nations resolution is going to be for dollars, euros, and yen within 5 years, but I'm going to tell you that the real power behind the power is an American. What do you mean, the power behind the power? The mightiest of the secret group of international money men. This guy runs the group. In other words, he's the one who shot down sterling as one of the currencies and has dollars in mind for the one world commodity in the end. I'm listening. Jonathan Stonegal. Buck had hoped Dirk would name someone ludicrous so he could burst into laughter, but he had to admit, if only to himself, that if there was anything to this, Stonegal would be a logical choice. One of the richest men in the world and long known as an American power broker, Stonegal would have to be involved if serious global finance was being discussed. Though he was already in his 80s and appeared in Furman News photos, he not only owned the biggest banks and financial institutions in the United States, but he also owned or had huge interest in the same throughout the world. Though Dirk was a friend, Buck had felt the need to play him along a bit to keep him eager to provide information. Dirk, I'm going to bed. I appreciate all this and find it very interesting. I'm going to see what comes out of this UN deal, and I'm also going to see if I can trace the movements of Jonathan Stonegal. If it happens the way you think, you'll be my best informant. Meanwhile, see if you can find out for me how many are in this secret group and where they meet. That's easy, Dirk had said. There are at least 10, though more than that sometimes comes to the meetings, including some heads of states. U.S. presidents? Occasionally, believe it or not. That's sort of one of the popular conspiracy theories here, Dirk. That doesn't mean it isn't true. and they usually meet in France. I don't know why. Some kind of private chalet or something there gives them a sense of security. Interesting. But nothing escapes your friend, of a relative, of a subordinate, of a secretary, or whatever. Laugh all you want, Cam. Our guy in the group, Joshua Todd Cawthorn, may just not be quite as buttoned down as the rest. Todd Cawthorn? Doesn't he run the London Exchange? That's the guy. Not buttoned down? How could he have that position and not be? Plus, who ever heard of a Brit who was not buttoned down? It happens. Good night, Dirk. Of course, it had all proven correct. The United Nations made its resolution. Buck discovered that Jonathan Stonegal had lived in the Plaza Hotel in New York during the 10 days of the confab. Mr. Todd Cawthorn of London had been one of the more eloquent speakers, expressing such eagerness to see the matter through that he volunteered to carry the torch back to the Prime Minister regarding Great Britain moving to the mark from the pound. Many third world countries fought the change, but within a few years the three currencies had swept the globe. Buck had told only Steve Plank of his tip on the UN meetings, but he didn't say where he'd gotten the information, and neither he nor Plank felt it worth a speculative article. Too risky, Steve had said. Soon they both wished they had run with it in advance. You have become even more of a legend, Buck. You would have become even more of a legend, Buck. Dirk and Buck had become closer than ever, and it wasn't unusual for Buck to visit London on short notice. If Dirk had a serious lead, Buck packed and went. His trips had often turned into excursions into countries and climates that surprised him. Thus, he had packed the emergency gear. Now it appeared it was superfluous. He was stuck in Chicago after the most electrifying phenomenon in the world history trying to get to New York. Despite the incredible capabilities of his laptop, there was still no substitute for the pocket notebook. Buck scribbled a list of things to do before settling off again. Call Ken Ritz, charter pilot. Call Dad and Jeff. Call Hattie Durham with news of family. Call Lucinda Washington about local hotel. Call Dirk Burton. The phone awakened Rayford Steele. He had not moved for hours. It was early evening and beginning to get dark. Hello, he said, unable to mask the sleepy huckiness in his voice. Captain Steele. It was the frantic voice of Hattie Durham. Yes, Hattie, are you all right? I've been trying to reach you for hours. My phone was dead for the longest time, then everything was busy. I thought I was getting a ring on your phone, but you never answered. I don't know anything about my mother or sisters. What about you? Rayford sat up, dizzy and disoriented. I got a message from Chloe, he said. I knew that, she said. You told me at O'Hare. Are your wife and son all right? No. No? Rayford was silent. What else was there to say? Do you know anything for sure? Hattie asked. I'm afraid I do, he said. Their bedclothes are here. Oh, no, Rayford. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do? No, thanks. Do you want some company? No, thanks. I'm scared. So am I, Hattie. What are you going to do? Keep trying to get Chloe. Hope she can come home or I can get to her. Where is she? Stanford. My people are in California too, Hattie said. They've got all kinds of trouble out there, even worse than here. I imagine it's because of the time difference, Rayford said. More people on the roads, that sort of thing. I'm scared to death of what's become of my family. Let me know what you find out, Hattie, okay? I will, but you were supposed to call me. Of course, my phone was dead, and then I couldn't get through to you. I wish I could say I tried to call you, Hattie, but I didn't. This is hard for me. Let me know if you need me, Rayford. You know, just someone to talk to or be with. I will, and you let me know what you find out about your family. He almost wished he hadn't added that. Losing his wife and child made him realize what a vapid relationship he had been pursuing with a 27-year-old woman He hardly knew her, and he certainly didn't much care what happened to her family any more than he cared when he heard about a remote tragedy on the news. He knew Hattie was not a bad person. In fact, she was nice and friendly, but that was not why he had been interested in her. It had merely been a physical attraction, something he had been smart enough or lucky enough or naive enough not to have acted upon. He felt guilty for having considered it, and now his own grief would obliterate all but the most common courtesy of simply caring for a coworker. "There's my call waiting," she said. "Can you hold?" "No, just go ahead and take it. I'll call you later." "I'll call you back, Rayford." "Well, okay." Buck Williams followed an excited crowd to an old payphone that was miraculously working. He wanted to see how many personal calls he could make. He reached Ken Ritz's voicemail first. "This is Ritz's charter service. Here's the deal in light of the crisis. I've got Lear jets at both Pewaukee and Waukegan, but I've lost my other flyer. I can get to either airport, but right now they're not letting anyone into any of the major strips. Can't get into Milwaukee, O'Hara, Kennedy, Logan, National, Dulles, Dallas, Atlanta. I can get into some of the smaller outing airports, but it's a seller's market. Sorry to be so opportunistic, but I'm asking $20 a mile cash up front. If I can find someone who wants to come back from where you're going, I might be able to give you a little discount. I'm checking messages tonight, and I will take off first thing in the morning. Longest trip with guaranteed cash gets me. If your stop is on the way, I'll try to squeeze you in. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you." That was a laugh. How would Ken Ritz get a hold of Buck? With his cell phone unreliable, the only thing he could think of was to leave his New York voicemail number. "Mr. Ritz, my name is Buck Williams, and I need to get as close to New York City as you can get me. I'll pay the full fare you're asking in traveler's checks, redeemable in whatever currency you want." Sometimes that was attractive to private contractors because they kept up with the differences in currency and could make a little margin on the exchange. "I'm at O'Hara and will try to find a place to stay in the suburbs. Just to save you time, let me just pick somewhere between here and Waukegan. If I get a new number in the meantime, I'll call it in. Meanwhile, you may have a message for me at the following New York number." Buck was still unable to get through to his office directly, but his voicemail number worked. He retrieved his new messages, mostly from coworkers checking on him and the loss of mutual friends. Then there was the welcome message from Marge Potter, who was a genius to think of leaving it there for him. "Buck, if you get this, call your father in Tucson. He and your brother are together, and I hate to tell you here, but they're having trouble reaching Jeff's wife and the kids. They should have news by the time you call. Your father was most grateful to hear that you were all right." Buck's voicemail also noted that he still had a saved message. That was the one from Dirk Burton that had spurred his trip in the first place. He would need to listen to it again when he had time. Meanwhile, he left a message for Marge that if she had time and an open line, she needed to let Dirk know Buck's flight never made it to Heathrow. Of course, Dirk would know that by now, but he needed to know Buck wasn't among the missing and that he would get there in due time. "Carmen." Buck hung up and dialed his father. The line was busy, but it was not the same kind of a tone that tells you the lines are down or that the whole system is kaput. Neither was it that irritating recording he'd grown so used to. He knew it would be only a matter of time before he could get through. Jeff must be beside himself not knowing about his wife, Sharon, and the kids. They'd had their differences and had even separated before the children came along, but for several years the marriage had been better. Jeff's wife had proven forgiving and conciliatory. Jeff himself admitted he was puzzled that she would take him back. "Call me undeserving but grateful," he once told Buck. Their son and daughter, who both looked like Jeff, were precious. Buck pulled out the number the beautiful blonde flight attendant had given him and chastised him for not trying to reach her earlier. It took a while for her to answer. "Hattie Durham, this is Buck Williams." "Who?" "Cameron Williams from the Global." "Oh, yes. Any news?" "Yes, ma'am. Good news." "Oh, thank God. Tell me." Someone from my office tells me they reached your mother and that she and your sisters are fine. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I wonder why they haven't called here. Maybe they've tried. My phone has been haywire. There are other problems in California, ma'am. Lines down, that kind of thing. It may be a while before you can talk to them. I know, I heard. Well, I sure appreciate this. How about you? Have you been able to reach your family? I got word that my dad and brother are okay. We still don't know about my sister in law and the kids. Oh, how old are the kids? Can't remember. Both under 10, but I don't know exactly. Oh, Hattie sounded sad, guarded. Why? Buck asked. Oh, nothing. It's just that what? You can't go by what I say. Tell me, Miss Durham. Well, you remember what I told you on the plane and on the news? It looks like all children are gone, even unborn ones. Yeah. I'm not saying that means your brother's children are. I know. I'm sorry I brought that up. No, it's okay. This is too strange, isn't it? Yeah, I just got off the phone with the captain who piloted the flight you were on. He lost his wife and son, but his daughter is okay. She's in California too. How old is she? About 20, I guess. She's at Stanford. Oh, Mr. Williams, what did you call yourself? Buck. It's a nickname. Well, Buck, I know better than to say what I said about your niece and nephew. I hope there are exceptions and that yours are okay. She began to cry. Miss Durham, it's okay. You have to admit no one is thinking straight right now. You can call me Hattie. That struck him as humorous under the circumstances. She had been apologizing for being inappropriate, yet she didn't want to be too formal. If he was Buck, she was Hattie. I suppose I shouldn't tie up this line, he said. I just wanted to get the news to you. I thought maybe by now you already knew. No, and thanks again. Would you mind calling me again sometime if you think of it? You seem like a nice person, and I appreciate what you did for me. It would be nice to hear from you again. This is kind of a scary, lonely time. He couldn't argue with that understatement. Funny, her request had sounded like anything but a come on. She seemed wholly sincere, and he was sure she was a nice, scared, lonely woman whose world had been skewed, just like his and everyone's he knew. When Buck got off the plane, he saw the young woman at the counter flagging him down. Listen, she whispered, they don't want me to making they don't want me making any announcement that would start a stampede, but we just heard something interesting. The livery companies have gotten together and moved their communications centers out to the median strip near the Mannheim Road interchange. Where's that? Just outside the airport. There's no traffic coming into the terminals anyway. Total gridlock. But if you can walk as far as that interchange, supposedly you'll find all those guys with walkie talkies trying to get limos in and out from there. I can imagine the prices. No, you probably can't. I can imagine the wait, like standing in line for a rental car in Orlando, she said. Buck had never done that, but he could imagine that too. And she was right. After he had hiked with a crowd to the Mannheim interchange, he found a mob surrounding the dispatchers. Intermittent announcements got everyone's attention. We're filling every car $100 ahead to any suburb. Cash only. Nothing's going to Chicago. No cards. No cards, someone shouted. I'll say it again, the dispatcher said. Cash only. If you know you've got cash or a checkbook at home, you can plead with the driver to trust you till you get there. He called out a listing of which companies were heading which directions. Passengers ran to fill the cars as they lined up on the shoulder of the expressway. Buck handed $100 traveler's check to the dispatcher for the northern suburbs. An hour and a half later, he joined several others in a limo. After checking his cell phone again to no avail, he offered the driver $50 to use his phone. No guarantees, the driver said. Sometimes I get through, sometimes I don't. Buck checked the phone log in his laptop for Lucinda Washington's home number and dialed. A teenage boy answered. Washington's Cameron Williams of Global Weekly calling for Lucinda. My mom's not here, the young man said. Is she still at the office? I need a recommendation where to stay near Waukegan. She's nowhere, the boy said. I'm the only one left. Mama, Daddy, everybody is gone, disappeared. Are you sure? Their clothes are here, right where they were sitting. My daddy's contact lenses are still on top of his bathrobe. Oh man, I'm sorry, son. That's all right. I know where they are, and I can't even say I'm surprised. You know where they are? If you know my mama, you know where she is too. She's in heaven. Yeah, well, are you all right? Is there someone to look after you? My uncle's here, and a guy from our church, probably the only one who's still around. You're all right then? I'm all right. Cameron folded the phone and handed it back to the driver. Any idea where I should stay if I'm trying to fly out of Waukegan in the morning? The chain hotels are probably full, but there's a couple of flea bags on Washington you might sneak into. You'd be close enough to the airport, you'd be my last drop off. Fair enough. They got phones in those dives. More likely a phone and a TV than running water. And that is the end of chapter 5. And tomorrow we will read chapter 6. And I thank you for coming. And you are free to go.